Hello everyone, I'm John Higgins and welcome to my YouTube channel, John Higgins Film Review. I'm delighted that you're all here. Please like and subscribe to the channel so I can help grow the channel with content like what we've got here. It's a warm welcome to my guest tonight, Mark Hampton. Now, he's an actor who's appeared in numerous film and television productions for both independent producers and studios such as Paramount, Netflix, BBC and ITV. And he features as the Prime Minister in the latest in a great indie thriller called Control, which premiered recently at the Genesis Cinema. And today we're going to be talking about his acting and his career and his process. He's also a filmmaker as well, so we're going to go through that as well. Mark, a good evening to you.
Hello, John. How are you? Really good to see you again.
Good to see you. It was great to see you at the premiere. It was a nice evening, and what a great time at the Genesis. You know, people chaperoning in and out. It's a great cinema. I mean, I love the Genesis Cinema because it's where independent films plays, particularly with the London Independent Film Festival. So let's talk a little bit about your start-off points. I mean, I understand you're originally from New Zealand, and then you moved to the UK as a child. So tell us.
I'm a Kiwi.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a I moved to the UK when I was 11 years old, so many years ago now. And so, I spent my young childhood over there, living in a small town called Taranui with 6,000 people. We had a little farm. We're not farmers, but we had a little bit of land, and I grew up riding horses and motorbikes and that kind of thing from when I was very young. And then I moved from that to Cambridge, where I moved into a terrace house with a small kind of patio at the back. So it was quite a culture shock for a kid, and there was a lot of playing in the streets back then in the sort of late 80s. So yeah, it was very different. I think my interest in film, though, had already sparked by that point. My father bought one of those early video cameras, which like a VHS box with an attached thing that looked like a gun for a camera. And I had immediately adopted that and started kind of pointing it at toys and pointing it at things and trying to kind of make little movies and trying to emulate Star Wars with bits of Lego and stuff like that. So that had already kind of that seed had already been planted, I think. And then as I was growing up in the UK, I kind of would rally my friends around to go to someone's house after school and would make a kind of remake of a Hollywood movie. We did a remake of things like The Untouchables, or we'd do remakes, or we'd do remakes of things like Predator and stuff like that. So we had a really good time kind of really just playing, but I guess also slowly trying to learn a little bit about the kind of craft of filmmaking, shot selection and editing and all that kind of thing. Initially, it was all just done in camera. Like literally, it was as if it was on a reel of Super 8, but it was on a video, but we'd shoot each shot in sequence, play it back on the TV, and we'd be like, wow, that was amazing. What should we do next? So it was a lot of fun. And then I had a different path that I went down in terms of education. I was very kind of science and maths and that kind of thing, but I always had this passion for cinema and filmmaking, and I loved performing and acting. And actually the acting bug for me really came from us making films and then me kind of saying, well, we need someone to play this character, and like, okay, well, I'll go and I'll play this character and you be on the camera for this one. And then I'd go in front of the camera and start doing whatever the part was, and just loved it. And I to this day, I love both aspects of filmmaking. I love being acting, and I love being behind the camera directing.
So I've got to backtrack a bit. Now you do realize you're being a bit sacrilegious when you mention The Untouchables in VHS, because that is my favorite film of 1987. So okay, so big budget movie, fantastic film, love it. Sean Connery, the late great Sean Connery is Malone, who has some of the best lines, but it has some fantastic sequences, the bridge sequence and the Grand Central
step sequence, of course. Yep.
So briefly tell us about your version and what did you do to embellish it?
Well, I think that the the truth of the matter is that version of it never got finished. It became one of those kind of part completed projects. We did a lot of the setup. We'd all got some kind of some hats and some big overcoats, and a friend of mine was taking on the Sean Connery role, and I was the Elliot Ness role, and we were kind of doing a lot of the setup. We sadly never got around, I don't think, to doing the Odessa Steps sequence, the Grand Central Station kind of shootout. Oh no, the Chicago shootout. So yeah, that was one that it was on the shelf as a to be completed, and sadly never was. But all of these things were made in my garden, my friend's garden, in the houses, and that they were just home movies which were copying, big movies. And we'd go out into we'd run through a river if we were doing Predator, or we did we did a remake of Labyrinth, which had loads of like hand puppets and things, and it was just ridiculous. And I played Jareth, and I played, Ogle, and it was great fun. Ridiculous films, absolutely ridiculous, but really, really good fun.
So let's talk a little bit about your early career, because I was reading that you made your feature film debut opposite none other than F. Murray Abraham of Amadeus and Scarface in an Italian co-production, which I think I understand, starred Marco Lemmet. So tell us a little bit about that experience. I mean, you're working with probably one of the all-time greats. I mean, he won the Oscar for Salieri and Amadeus. So tell us about what was he like? What was he like working?
He was a Hollywood great. And what's funny is that I had no idea that he was in the film. I had no idea that he was going to be in the film. I had just recently joined an agent in London. I had gone to their office to go and have a meeting with his agent, and as I was due to have this meeting, she was running late, and then she came in with this producer, this Italian producer, and said, "Oh, this is Mark. We're just having a meeting." And I sat down with this producer. She said, "He's making a film." So I immediately latched onto him and said, "Oh, tell me all about your film. Let's hear it." And by the end of that discussion, I had a part in his movie, and I was like, "This is how Hollywood works. You just meet someone, they cast you in their movie," and that genuinely is how that one worked. And I flew out to Italy, and we were doing a scene in a boat. The first scene I was doing, we were in a boat. We're prisoners escaping, and as we're filming the scene, F. Murray Abrams walks into the scene, and I knew the character because I'd read it in the script. I didn't know he was playing it. And I guess it's because he would turn up and do his bit and all the rest of it. So there wasn't no rehearsal period. There was none of that. It was a low budget co-production, and we just and it was phenomenal. I was like, oh my goodness, that's the guy. That's Salieri right there, and there he was in front of me. We got to do scenes together, and I think that I was very young and very green at the time. And I think that one of the things he really kind of taught me was around like, what's the work that an actor has to do? Like, it's not what you do and what you say when you step onto set, the work that you have to do in your preparation. Like, how do you build a character? I had really no idea about any of this stuff. I just thought that being an actor meant turning up, showing them your good side, delivering lines, and not bumping into the furniture, to quote Roger Moore. But and he was my first introduction to like the process of acting. And it still took me many years after that to actually get any good at it. And that early run of being an actor, I did that as an opening thing, and then various TV programs and small bits and things like Grange Hill and Casualty, and the Tomb Raider film with Angelina Jolie and stuff like that, before I had my big break. And when I say a big break, I don't mean I became famous. I mean, I took a big long break from acting to have kids. And now in the last few years, I've really come back into the industry and really been able to kind of get back into being an actor from a very different perspective, from a different age.
Yeah, so let's talk. We're going to talk a little bit about the how the benefits and the pros and cons of actually taking a lengthy break. Because obviously there are people who are watching this thinking, well, there's a determination with acting to, you've got to get there, and you've got to sort of reap what you sow and strike while the iron's hot. All these kind of cliches that you have. I want to just talk briefly about Lara Croft Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie. Tell us a bit about what you played, because, of course, that was a film with Daniel Craig before he became Bond. So what was the experience like working on that big film?
Oh, it was a glorified extra, really, if I'm really honest. So I was one of a group of guys who brought in to play henchmen. Essentially, we were guards for the main villain, and so there were when I auditioned, we were auditioning for a character who was going to be a villain who was going to have a fight to the death with Angelina Jolie, and we were like, wow, that sounds great. When I did the audition, did a bunch of stuff to demonstrate your physicality and all the stuff, and then got the call saying you've been cast. I was like, fantastic, this is amazing. And then we got there, and it turned out I think there were 6 of us all together who were this kind of group of guards, and we were literally just called Reese's Guard. And I think I'm the very last name on the credits of that movie. Literally at the very bottom, Mark Hampton, Reese's Guard number 6, right? So that was it's a big Hollywood movie. We did work with Angelina; she was great. met Maddock, who was just tiny at the time, and and had a good time on it. But and for me, it was a great experience because it was in the Bond 007 stage at Pinewood. They built this enormous sets and this huge lighting setup. So there were 4 cameras running, 35 mil all the time. It was just huge, big studio stuff. And we were, we were cast, we were, proper cast members, as opposed to being kind of walk-ons and background. And I'd done walk-on and background stuff. I'd done that in my early days just to familiarize myself with big sets so I could be comfortable with them. I'd gone and done extras work on Star Wars and Bond and stuff like that. So, but it was nice to be there as a cast member where you were, had a role to play. It was a lot of fun. It was very late, a lot of night shoots, very cold. And and we got some kind of decent screen time. We all got some fun death scenes with the various CGI monsters, and it was good fun. Really, really good fun.
Yeah, I think an acting friend of mine, Tay Brandon, I think you might have actually been one of the extras alongside it, because I think he played he was actually shooting guns as well. So I think he sort of told me a story, because we were actually studying acting with the Actors Theatre School back in the late 90s, and he would we'd occasionally get things, we do, and he's told me that he was and it was around the time that Angelina Jolie had adopted Maddox, so he was making all kinds of, we would be in acting class, and he'd have been to Pinewood doing Tomb Raider. So I just want to deviate a little bit and talk a little bit about the actual hiatus of acting. So when you were taking a break, how did you, first of all, how hard was it to go away for a break and just think, right, and then subsequently now, because you've come back in control, which we're going to talk about later, what was the mantra that you used to kind of bring yourself back into play around acting? What was the path back into it?
So when I decided it was time to step away from acting, it was triggered by having young children. I had a young child and I had another one on the way. And unless you get that breakthrough as an actor, it's and become either some sort of star, or you become even a kind of proper, regular jobbing actor with a stable income, it was very hard for me to see how this was going to be sustainable for, raising kids. Suddenly you have small people who are going to, the clock is ticking. They're going to be going to school and they're 5. They're going to be teenagers. They're going to need things. They're going to need things that will cost money. And so I took a fairly tricky decision to step away completely from the industry. At the time, I was acting, but I was also working as an assistant director on TV commercials and music videos. So my job was in front of the camera or behind the camera, and all freelance. And at the same time, the production work had started to kind of get a bit thin on the ground, because this is just when internet virals were taking off. And so budgets were shrinking because they were not being bought out for just territories, but they were just going online, and it was just getting harder and harder. And so I just decided, right, I'm going to step away from this industry completely. I'm not going to do something that's alongside it or similar to it, or I'm not going to get a job that's near. I just want to completely step away from it and go and do something else. But my condition to myself, and I'm the only person I made this deal with, was that I would always retain that creativity. I would retain that passion, and then when I came back, it would be on my terms. And that's essentially what I've done. I've now got to the point where I'm able to take roles that I want to play. I've directed a feature film this year of my own, where I've written and directed myself in a leading role in a film that I want to make. I've made several shorts. In the interim period, I maintained that creativity by making like the Done in 60 Seconds films for Empire magazine, and little short films, and keeping the juices flowing, writing. But actually breaking back into acting was really about being selective about what I want to do, not feeling like I have to say yes to everything that comes my way. And and I think when you're ready, things start coming to you. I think there's a real it's kind of interesting, because I am a huge believer in mindset, and I believe in that the energy you put out into the world is what you attract in the world. And I think I came back into the this industry with a view that I knew what my value was. I know what I'm going to do. I would do acting jobs that I think suit me, and I don't feel pressured to do other work. If I don't fancy it, I just say no. It's as simple as that. So I've managed to succeed on that bargain that I made with myself, to come back into this game, but actually do it on my own terms.
That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, that's going to be inspiration to so many people out there because it's been difficult these days. I mean, certainly with diversity and Me Too and everything else, there's so many factors. The actor strike, for example, and AI, which are
It's been a
affecting the
lot. Yeah.
industry in such a big thing. But what's interesting is that I feel it will balance out anyway. So we're going to talk a little bit about returning to the industry now because you've now,
Yep.
you've mentioned that you did short films and independent feature films. Now in 2022, which was just after the COVID-19 lockdowns, you returned to television in the BBC COVID drama This England with Kenneth Branagh as Boris Johnson. Now, okay, so let's talk a little bit about Kenneth Branagh because he's an enigma. I mean, he's not only a respected theatre, he's one of the legends of theatre, but he's now making some really interesting choices creatively. I mean, he did Jack Ryan's Shadow, the Jack Ryan film with Chris Pine. He's done Thor. I
Yep.
mean, he's really got kind of, he's one of those rarities that actually can do it all. He's wonderful. So tell us a bit about your role in that and what was your relationship?
So I never met Sir Ken on that film. Mine was a very small role. It was interesting for me because I got to play a real person. I got to play a guy called George Gao. You know, I'm mixed race Chinese, and he was a Chinese. He was the director of the Chinese Center for Disease Research or something like that. I can't remember the name exactly, but he was a real person. I was able to watch YouTube videos of him doing conferences and presentations, and so when it came to trying to present him on camera, I was able to kind of use the reality of him, trying to use the accent, because as a rule, one of the rules that I have about jobs that I would do and won't do is that despite being mixed race Chinese, I won't do the accent. I won't put on a Chinese accent. I just won't. That's just not part of my thing. And I made the exception because he was a real person, because I was playing a real individual, and that was really fascinating to do because I could, like I say, I could try and get his mannerisms, try and get his speech, the way that he kind of shapes his words, and the way that and try and kind of lock in. And interesting, the word that I locked into was virus, because he had this funny way of saying virus that kind of moved around the mouth. He kind of said virus, and that was the word that kind of I could have locked into and then built the kind of accent around that. But yeah, it was a very inauspicious return to TV because it was my character scenes take place on a Zoom calls because they're talking between the London and they're talking to this Chinese Center for Disease Control, and so I'm only ever seen on a Zoom call, and we actually filmed it on a Zoom call. So I had to, in fact, in this very room, I was I had to dress the background of the other side of this room and put various bits of Chinese stuff up to make it look as if I was in an office in China. So it was kind of, it was not a big flash glamorous return to the, with a trailer and all the rest of it, return to TV. That did come later, but like, it was interesting it was great to be cast in it and have a named role, because that was my first named TV role since 2006 or something. So that for me was really was a milestone.
Yeah, I mean, it's great because I was just looking at your other credits. I mean, you appeared as a solicitor to Emmerdale bad boy Kane Dingle in the Apple TV film Liaison, which stars Ava Green and Vincent Cassel. And then you were also opposite Jamie Winston in the vampire comedy Count Abdullah. And you were in a cameo in the final season of BBC Go. So I want to sort of move on to more current roles because I think I would like to talk a little bit about the future, the present and future. So let's kick off with, let's talk a little bit about Control, which I enjoyed at the wonderful premiere that was at the Genesis Cinema in Mile End, where we caught up and we chatted briefly. I mean, it was one of those wonderful moments that you very rarely get in Mile End of all places. But the wonderful thing is everybody made an effort. So let's talk a little bit about Control. I mean, you play the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
and how long were you working on it, and what was it like playing a Prime Minister?
I really enjoyed the role, and it gave me really something to sink my teeth into, because if you recall from the screening, like, this is a prime minister who is very, very much in the favor and in the pocket of kind of big business. He's really kind of he wants to sell everyone's data, he wants to loosen regulations, and it's kind of that sort of free marketeering role that we kind of currently have in Rishi Sunak, right? I mean, he's an investment banker who's become prime minister, so there were kind of interesting parallels. But I think that prior to that, what this role allowed me to do is to really kind of dig in and find the kind of the hooks into his character, like what made him tick, what was he about, how had he got to where he was, how did he got to become prime minister, and then what does that mean for his kind of personality, what does it mean for him in terms of the type of person that he is, and all of that would then feed into those scenes. And you know, it's fantastic fun for me. You know, essentially my character opens the movie with this big speech to a big room full of, you know, important delegates, and gets to do the classic politician, you know, shaking hands and smiling and, oh, thanks, that was great, and you know, that was, you know, a real treat to kind of play that. And I've said this a few times before, but my favorite compliment that I had from quite a few people on the day we shot was when people would come up to me and say, "I'd vote for you." You know, that was great. You know, it really gives me that kind of like, well, that's it. If I'm bringing truth to the role, and they see me up on that stage, and they can genuinely believe that I am that person, then that's my job done. You know, I can feel proud about that.
So let's talk a little bit about two other films that you've got coming in 2024. Let's kick off with Lift, which is an action comedy starring Kevin Hart, Billy Magnussen, and Jean Reno, which is released on Netflix on 20th of January next year. And I understand you play a fighter pilot, and
I
apparently,
play, yeah.
and I
It's,
was just reading that you're a huge Top Gun fan, so you're sort of following in the footsteps of Mr. Cruise. So tell us a bit about this role. What, without giving too many spoilers away, tell us about this role and
so
what.
yeah, it's a fighter pilot, right? So and for there to be a fighter pilot, there must be a fighter plane, and for there to be a fighter plane, there must be some sort of sequence going on the air. I think the trailer is now out, so you can kind of see what the film was about. It's about a mid-air kind of heist, so a heist that takes place on this kind of futuristic plane, and then at some point the you know, the military gets called in, and these fighter pilots come in, and they're sort of flying around and trying to work out what's going on and whether they need to take down the plane, and it's a lot of kind of dramatic stuff. It was a lot of fun to do. You're talking to a guy who once made a 60-second kind of spoof of Top Gun and won an Empire Award for it. So like, I love Top Gun. I'm a huge fan, and when Top Gun Maverick came out, that just kind of reinforced that that love of that film. So for me to get to play a fighter pilot in a big movie was just wonderful. I went on to set. There's a huge mock-up of a Raptor F-35 cockpit with all the instrumentation and all the rest of it. I'm in all the flight gear, the helmet, the mask, the bike, all of it, and it's just like, it was just, I got to basically play Top Gun for the whole time I was there. You know, the lines were different, but it was essentially, you're like in the mode of Top Gun. And I don't know what's gonna what you'll see on the film, because by the time you've got that visor and that mask and the helmet and the gear, it kind of could be anybody. But I'm very glad it was me, because I had such a wonderful time really kind of living out that boyhood fantasy. It was great fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Top Gun Maverick was one of my favorite films of recent times. I mean, the minute that the stuff goes out, and I love Monica Barbaro, who plays the female pilot. She's absolutely brilliant in it. So in a way, you've kind of fulfilled a dream. So let's move on to the next film that you've done, which is From Here. As I understand, it's a single shot action sequel to One Shot by James Gunn, and it's called One More Shot, which you are starring, which stars Scott Adkins, and you play a
Yeah.
CIA agent. So tell us a bit about that.
So it's so One Shot is a film that James Nunn made with Scott, and it was kind of a siege movie. They land on an island, and then a bunch of terrorists come to take, and he's escorting a suspect, and then a bunch of terrorists break in and kill everybody and try and get him. And the whole movie takes place, or appears to take place, in one continuous shot, and it was brilliantly done. And then so One More Shot literally follows on from the very end of that movie, where Scott's going off with the prisoner, and they land in an airport, and immediately they're under siege kind of again from these same baddies, whoever they might be, who want this guy dead. And so it's a, you know, it's a breathtaking, like high paced kind of run through an airport. We shot it all night shoots in Stansted Airport, which was a lot of work, because, you know, getting airside when you're wielding artificial guns and stuff like that is no mean feat. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of admin. But we had a great time shooting there, shooting nights. I play a guy called Agent Lamb, who's one of the CIA agents who's helping Scott as they undertake this defense of this land, because they've got these terrorists attacking them. And it was wonderful. Again, it was a bit like playing it was a bit of a boyhood dream. We had the weapons guys there teaching us how to draw the gun properly, and how what the real guys in the field do. And then we're standing there with our Glocks, kind of pulling them up and firing. And I've got a great a great death scene in it. Spoiler alert, but again, it was really fun, and it allowed me to do some stunt work, allowed me to do some weapon work, and so again, it was really really me kind of living out like boyhood dream of being an actor, really being an action kind of action hero. Not quite Scott Atkins yet, but there we go.
Okay, and the CIA connection doesn't stop there, because your other film that's been released this year is a thing called Heads of State, which is from director Ilya Naishuller, and he did Hardcore, and behind
Yeah, Hardcore Henry.
director of
Yeah,
Hardcore Henry and Nobody, and it stars John Cena and Idris Elba, and you play opposites. Senna, who plays the US president, and Ted
yeah.
Lasso stars Sarah Niles. So, okay, so I'm curious to know about this one, because it's quite a really interesting mix, because I mean, Senna he's such a big presence on screen, and Idris
You know
Elba,
what?
yeah, and Idris Elba, who is always with Luther and everything else he's done over the years, he's always another great guy. I mean, I did meet him at a screening of his short film Odysseus last year, and he's a very gentle giant of a man, and it was really great. So tell
He's
us a bit.
great. I mean,
Yeah,
so
so
I have a brilliant scene in the back of the presidential limo, which they call the Beast, where John Cena is playing the president. I'm playing a CIA guy, giving him a bunch of information about some terrorist stuff that's going on. He is a big guy. He's a big star and a big guy, and you don't quite realize just how big he is until you kind of shake his hand, and then you shake his hand, you feel like part of your arm has disappeared into his hand. He's that huge, but he's a real sweetie and a real pro. Like, he's fantastically professional, on set, in terms of like how we structure a scene, how we deliver a scene, get the tones and the beats and all the rest of it. So we had a really fantastic experience. I think in order to sum up the film, can I ask this question of the director, and the response I got was, this is a buddy movie. John Cena is the president, Idris is the prime minister of the UK. They're on Air Force One. It goes down. They have to fight their way out of this kind of foreign, dangerous territory that they end up in. And the film that he said to me that he compared it to was Midnight Run, and which is this the fantastic 80s film with De Niro and Charles Grodin. And when, as soon as he said that, I went, I get it. I get the tone of the humor, because I could read that in the script. I could hear that those lines coming out. They're at each other, but they're kind of becoming buddies over the course of the movie, and that's so I think it's going to be a cracker. I think it's going to be a great film.
yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, the last time we had a president and prime minister at odds was, I think, 20 years ago, with Hugh Grant and Billy Bob Thornton sort of competing over Martin McCutcheon in Love Actually. So I think this one's better. I mean, I kind of anticipate that Midnight Run's going to have a bit of fistophobia about it, quoting one of De Niro's favorite lines. And actually, I'm looking forward to seeing that, because Midnight Run was my favorite film of 1988. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I've just got two or three more questions to ask you. And I understand that you're working on you've written and co-produced a high octane heist movie, which is you're hoping to start shooting this year in 2024. Can you just share with us, how far along are you with it? Is it in pre-production? Have you got confirmation of when you're going to shoot it? And could you tell us a bit about it?
So the film is called Five Cars, and it's a heist movie that is set in and around 5 different cars. The whole story takes place. It's about a guy who is released from prison and immediately gets drawn into a heist by his older brother, who's the head of a crime family. There's a bank heist, there's a car chase, there's a double cross, there's a love triangle, there's all sorts of things going on, but the story all takes place in these kind of contained within these kind of 5 cars. I wrote this as an indie script that I was going to shoot on a kind of micro budget, and I had a meeting with a producer who I met on the plane on the way back from the Cannes Film Festival. And I had a classic elevator pitch moment where I had the opportunity to essentially pitch my film to a producer, and did so. And he said, "That sounds fantastic. Why don't you send it over and I'll have a read?" And then I expected to hear nothing from him. And then they called me and said, "I think we could do something with it. So let's think about developing it." So it's now gone from being that very small micro budget indie where I was going to go to a proving ground and strap cameras to cars and that's it. It's now looking like it's going to be much more of a kind of digital LED volume style filmmaking with kind of, CGI and stuff like that. So the scope of the film has really changed. Where we are with it is that the film has been the script has been optioned by the production company. We are kind of actively developing it, and we're hoping that we will shoot in sort of middle of next year, but we haven't formally entered pre-production. Conversations are going on with different companies for financing at the moment, but it's very positive. I think it's going to be really exciting when we can sort of talk about it a bit more, because at the moment nothing's confirmed. So it's a really exciting project that I hope will go ahead kind of towards the middle of next year.
Okay, well, my final question before we wrap up is, I mean, what are you most proud of about your career, Mark?
The thing that I'm most proud of about my career is probably my feature film Unlicensed, which I'm editing right now. So I am a filmmaker, but I'd always wanted to make a movie, and I'd never quite thought the time was right. And actually, earlier this year, I got to a point in time where I just said, okay, enough is enough. I've always wanted to do this. I'm just going to do it. And so I went out there and raised a small amount of money, put some of my own money into it, and wrote a script for myself that I was directing, that I played the lead role in, that has a lot of aspects of it's a boxing movie, it's a family drama, it's a redemption story, and I think it's going to be a cracking little indie, kind of micro budget indie, and that I hope to do a kind of self-distribution release sometime next year. But the fact that I took that risk and went out and made a movie, I think is the one thing that I feel really, really proud of. And I'm, like I said, I'm editing it right now. It looks really good. I'm really proud of what we've achieved, especially at the level of budget we were at. I basically did the classic thing of pulling in all the favors. I pulled in all of my drama school classmates who I knew were fantastic actors. So it's got no stars, but it's got a brilliant cast. And I just can't wait for that to then become a final finished movie that we can put up on a big screen, like at the Genesis or somewhere like that, and go and do the same thing, get people to come in and enjoy the thing that we created.
Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I'm sure that one day we will see this new film and everything else. I mean, the movie's very exciting. Netflix will, I think you're going to go into the stratosphere next year. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Great to see you again. Just wrapping up, for more interviews like this, you can go to the John Higgins Film Review channel on YouTube. You can also check out my new film review resource, whatmovie.co.uk, which we launched last year, which is in development. And if you want to read more articles, reviews, and interviews, you can go to my companion work at www.filmandtv now. So on that note, Mark, thank you very much and take care.
Great to see you, John.
And
thank you
very much for watching.